Have you ever studied something carefully and then forgotten it a few hours later? Maybe you read a lesson, understood it at that moment, and the next day you could hardly remember anything. Maybe someone told you their name, but a few minutes later the name disappeared from your mind. Or perhaps you watched an English lesson, learned some useful words, and when you tried to use them in a conversation, your mind suddenly became blank. This happens to many people. It does not automatically mean that you have a bad memory. In many cases, the real problem is the way information enters your mind, the way you practice it, and the way you review it later. Memory is not only about trying harder. It is about learning in a way that gives your brain a reason to keep the information. Your brain receives an enormous amount of information every day. You see people, hear sounds, read messages, watch videos, notice advertisements, think about problems, remember old experiences, and receive new information almost every minute. Your mind cannot treat every small detail as equally important. It has to decide what deserves attention and what can be ignored. That is one reason we forget so easily. If something feels unimportant, confusing, boring, or completely disconnected from our life, it becomes much harder to remember. On the other hand, when something is meaningful, emotional, useful, surprising, or connected to something we already know, we often remember it much more easily. Think about a movie you watched several years ago. You may still remember a dramatic scene, a funny moment, or an emotional ending. But you may forget a page of a textbook that you read yesterday. Why? You probably paid more attention to the movie. You saw images, heard voices, followed a story, and felt emotions. The textbook page may have been something you were simply trying to finish. This teaches us an important lesson. Before trying to improve memory, we should improve attention. Imagine that someone is speaking to you while you're checking your phone. You hear their voice, but your attention is divided. A few minutes later, you may not remember what they said. The problem is not always that your memory failed. Sometimes the information never entered your mind clearly in the first place. The same thing happens while studying. You may sit with a book for 2 hours, but during those 2 hours you check messages, open social media, think about tomorrow, watch a short video, answer a notification, and then return to the book. You may feel that you studied for 2 hours, but your real focused learning time may have been much shorter. Memory begins with attention. If you want to remember something, first give it your full attention. This is especially important for English learners. Imagine that you are learning the word confident. You read it once and continue to the next word. Later, you forget it. But what happens if you stop for a moment? You say the word aloud, confident. Then you think about its meaning. You create a sentence. I want to feel confident when I speak English. Then you remember a situation when you were nervous and imagine yourself speaking confidently next time. Now the word is connected to meaning, sound, emotion, and personal experience. It has a much better chance of staying in your memory. One simple way to improve attention is to stop trying to do many things at the same time. Many people believe multitasking helps them save time. But when you constantly move between different activities, your attention becomes fragmented. If you're studying English, study English. If you're listening to a lesson, listen to the lesson. If you're practicing speaking, focus on speaking. You do not need to study for 3 or 4 hours without stopping. In fact, Shorter periods of real concentration can often be much more useful than long periods of tired, distracted study. You can study for around 25 minutes with complete attention and then take a short break. During those 25 minutes, put your phone away, close unnecessary tabs, and choose one clear goal. For example, your goal might be, for the next 25 minutes, I will learn 10 useful English expressions and create my own sentences with them. That is very different from saying, I'm going to study English. A clear goal tells your brain what matters. Your environment can also influence your attention. If possible, choose a place where you can sit comfortably and focus. Keep only the materials you need in front of you. If your phone keeps distracting you, place it somewhere you cannot easily reach. Even a small change can make a big difference. Another powerful way to remember information is to become curious about it. Instead of saying, I have to memorize this, ask questions. Why does this word mean this? When would a native speaker use this expression? What is the difference between these two words? Can I use this sentence at work? Can I use it when talking to a friend? What would happen if I changed the tense? Questions make learning active. When you search for an answer, your brain becomes involved. And involvement helps memory. Many learners make another mistake. They try to memorize information before they truly understand it. They repeat a sentence again and again without understanding the grammar. They memorize a definition without knowing what it means. They memorize a long paragraph because they need it for an exam. This may work for a short time, but information learned without meaning is often difficult to keep. Understanding gives information a structure. Suppose you want to remember an English grammar rule. You could read the rule 10 times. Or you could understand why the rule works. Look at a few examples, compare correct and incorrect sentences, and then create examples from your own life. Which method will probably stay longer? Usually, the second one. When you understand something, you are not remembering one isolated sentence. You are creating connections. Your brain works very well with connections. Imagine you learn the word appointment. If you only memorize, appointment means a planned meeting. You may forget it, but imagine you connect it with your life. I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. My manager scheduled an appointment with a client. I need to make an appointment. Now, the word has several connections. When one connection becomes weak, another connection can help you remember. You can do the same with almost anything you learn. Whenever you study something new, ask yourself, what does this remind me of? If you learn a new English expression, connect it to a situation. If you learn a new name, connect it to the person's face. If you learn an idea, connect it to something you already understand. If you learn a process, connect the steps together. Connections make information easier to find later. Another useful habit is explaining what you have learned in your own words. After finishing a lesson, close the book or pause the video. Then ask yourself, what did I just learn? Try to explain it simply. Do not look at your notes immediately. For example, suppose you watched a lesson about the present perfect tense. After the lesson, you might say, the present perfect connects the past with the present. We often use have or has with the past participle. For example, I have lived here for 5 years. You do not need a perfect explanation. The purpose is to force your mind to organize the information. When you try to explain something, you quickly discover what you actually understand and what you do not. Maybe you can explain the first part, but become confused about when to use for and since. Good. Now you know exactly what you need to study again. This is much better than reading the whole lesson repeatedly. You can even pretend that you are teaching another person. Imagine there is a student sitting in front of you. How would you explain the idea to them? Try to use simple language. If you can explain a difficult idea using simple words, that usually shows that your understanding is becoming stronger. Teaching is powerful because it forces you to organize your thoughts. You can teach a friend, a family member, an imaginary student, or even an empty room. You can also record yourself explaining the lesson. This is particularly useful for English learners because you practice memory and speaking at the same time. Another technique is visualization. Words can sometimes feel abstract. Pictures are easier to imagine. Suppose you learn the word enormous. Instead of repeating, enormous means very large. Imagine an enormous elephant standing beside a tiny bicycle. Make the picture strange. Imagine the elephant trying to ride the bicycle. The more unusual the picture is, the easier it may be to remember. Suppose you want to remember the word exhausted. Imagine yourself coming home after walking for 10 hours. You fall onto the sofa and say, "I'm exhausted." Now the word has an image and a feeling. Visualization can also help when learning processes. If you need to remember a sequence, imagine each step happening like a short movie in your mind. You do not need artistic imagination. The picture only needs to make sense to you. Association works in a similar way. When you learn something new, attach it to something familiar. Imagine meeting a man named Jack who has a black jacket. You might connect Jack with jacket. It may sound silly, but simple connections can help you remember names. If you meet someone named Rose, you might imagine a rose beside their face. The connection does not need to be logical. It only needs to help your memory. Stories are another powerful tool. Human beings naturally remember stories because stories contain movement, people, emotion, cause, and effect. Imagine you need to remember several unrelated words: apple, train, dog, umbrella, phone. Instead of memorizing them separately, create a strange story. An enormous apple is driving a train. A dog is sitting on top of the train holding an umbrella. Suddenly, the dog's phone starts ringing. It sounds ridiculous. That is exactly why you may remember it. A strange story is often easier to remember than 5 unrelated words. You can use this method for vocabulary, lists, ideas, and even presentations. Another simple technique is chunking. Long information feels difficult when we see it as one large block. So divide it into smaller groups. You already use chunking in daily life. Phone numbers are easier to remember when they're divided into groups. A long lesson becomes easier when you divide it into a few main ideas. Instead of trying to remember 20 separate points, organize them into 4 groups. For example, if you're learning 20 English words, you might divide them into 5 words about food, 5 words about work, 5 words about travel, and 5 words about emotions. Now your brain has a structure. Structure reduces confusion. One of the most important memory habits is active recall. Many learners spend most of their study time reading the same information repeatedly. They read a page, then they read it again, then they highlight it, then they read the highlighted part again. It feels productive because the information becomes familiar. But familiarity is not the same as memory. You know something well when you can produce it without looking. After learning something, close your notes. Try to remember. Ask yourself questions. Write down everything you can remember. Then open the notes and check what you missed. This small struggle is useful. When your brain tries to retrieve information, the memory pathway becomes stronger. For example, after learning 10 vocabulary words, do not immediately read them again. Cover the meanings. Look at each word and try to remember the meaning. Then do the opposite. Look at the meaning and try to remember the English word. Then create sentences without looking at the examples. That is active recall. The same idea works for any subject. If you're studying history, close the book and explain the event. If you're studying science, draw the process from memory. If you're learning English grammar, create examples. If you're preparing a presentation, practice without reading the slides. Testing yourself is not only something you do before an exam. Testing is part of learning. Another major reason people forget is that they study something once and never return to it. Memory naturally becomes weaker when information is not used. That is why revision is important. But revision does not mean repeating everything 10 times in one evening. It is usually better to return to information after some time has passed. You can learn something today, review it tomorrow, review it again a few days later, and then return to it after a longer gap. The exact schedule does not need to be perfect. The important idea is to spread your reviews over time. For example, imagine you learn 15 English words on Monday. On Tuesday, test yourself. A few days later, test yourself again. The following week, use those words in sentences. Later, try to use them while speaking. Every time you successfully recall the information, you're telling your brain, I still need this. This is why regularly using English is so important. If you learn a word but never speak it, write it, hear it, or read it again, forgetting is very likely. So turn new knowledge into something useful. If you learn the phrase, that sounds interesting, use it in a conversation. If you learn, I'm looking forward to it, send it in a message when appropriate. If you learn, could you explain that again? Use it during an English lesson. The more useful a phrase becomes in your real life, the easier it becomes to remember. You can create a simple daily memory routine. At the beginning of your study session, spend 5 minutes remembering what you learned yesterday. Do not immediately open your notes. Ask yourself, what can I remember? Maybe yesterday you learned 5 expressions. Try to say all 5. Maybe you remember only 3. That is fine. Now, check the other 2. This small daily habit can be much more useful than waiting until the end of the month and trying to relearn everything. Writing can also help. When you write something in your own words, you slow down and process the information. You do not need beautiful notes. In fact, spending too much time decorating notes can sometimes become another form of distraction. Write short ideas. Use simple language. Write examples. Ask questions. Make connections. You can keep a small learning notebook. On one page, write what you learned. On another page, write questions that you can use later to test yourself. For example, what does confident mean? What is the difference between say and tell? When do we use the present perfect? Then return later and answer without checking your notes first. Another important factor is sleep. Many learners sacrifice sleep because they believe more study time automatically means better results. But studying while extremely tired is often inefficient. Your attention becomes weaker. Your thinking becomes slower. You read the same sentence several times without understanding it. A rested mind usually learns more effectively than an exhausted mind. So do not see sleep as the enemy of learning. Rest is part of learning. If possible, keep a reasonably regular sleep routine, especially when you're studying something important. Stress can also affect your ability to remember. You may have experienced this during an exam. At home, you knew the answer. During the exam, suddenly your mind became blank. Then, after leaving the exam room, the answer returned. Pressure can interfere with recall. That is why practicing in a calm but realistic way is useful. If you have a speaking test, do not only read your answers. Practice speaking them. Set a timer. Ask someone to question you. Make small mistakes. Become comfortable with the situation before the real test. If you become nervous while studying, stop for a moment. Take a slow breath. Relax your shoulders. Then return to the task. You do not need to fight your brain. Learning works better when you're focused and reasonably calm. Movement can also help you maintain energy. If you have been sitting for a long time, stand up. Walk for a few minutes. Stretch your body. Then return to your study session. You do not need a complicated routine. The purpose is simply to prevent your body and mind from becoming completely tired. Another habit that makes learning easier is creating interest. Sometimes we cannot choose what we need to study. A subject may feel boring, but we can still look for a reason to care. Ask yourself, how could this help me? Well, might I use this? Can I connect it to something I enjoy? For an English learner, imagine you dislike memorizing vocabulary. Instead of studying random vocabulary lists, choose words connected to something you already like. If you love football, learn football vocabulary. If you like cooking, watch simple cooking videos in English. If you enjoy technology, read technology news in English. You're still learning vocabulary, but now your natural interest helps your attention. You can later expand into other topics. Another problem is trying to learn too much at once. People often become excited and create impossible plans. I will learn 100 new words every day. I will study English for 5 hours every night. I will finish the entire grammar book this week. They may follow the plan for 2 days. Then they become exhausted and stop completely. Memory improves through consistency, not through one extreme day. 10 useful words that you remember and use are better than 100 words that disappear tomorrow. 20 focused minutes every day can be more valuable than 5 distracted hours once a week. Small learning feels slow, but small learning builds. Imagine learning only 5 useful English expressions each day. 5 expressions may not feel impressive, but if you keep practicing, reviewing, and using them, your vocabulary gradually becomes much larger. The important thing is not simply collecting information. You want information you can actually use. This brings us to one of the most useful questions you can ask after learning anything. Can I use this? If the answer is yes, use it immediately. You learn a new word? Say a sentence. You learn a grammar structure? Create 3 examples. You learned a speaking expression? Use it during your next conversation. You learned an idea? Explain it to someone. Knowledge becomes stronger through use. You can also combine several memory techniques together. Imagine you want to learn the word generous. First, understand it. A generous person likes giving or sharing with others. Next, visualize it. Imagine someone giving food to many people. Then connect it to someone you know. My uncle is very generous. Then say the word aloud. Generous. Then create a sentence. She is generous with her time. A few hours later, try to remember the word without looking. The next day, use it again. You have now used meaning, visualization, personal connection, speaking, writing, and active recall. That is much stronger than reading the word 20 times. You can use a similar system for names. When someone tells you their name, pay attention immediately. Look at the person. Repeat the name naturally. If someone says, "Hi, I'm Daniel," you can reply, "Nice to meet you, Daniel." Then connect Daniel to something noticeable about the situation. Maybe you met Daniel at the gym. Now your brain has 3 pieces of information: Daniel, his face, and the gym. Later, when you see him, the situation may help you remember his name. Do not expect every technique to work perfectly every time. Memory is not a machine. Some information will still disappear. That is normal. The goal is not to remember every second of your life. The goal is to become better at remembering information that matters. Another useful habit is reviewing your day before sleeping. You do not need to study. Just ask yourself, what did I learn today? What new English word did I use? What was the most useful idea? What do I want to remember tomorrow? This could take only a few minutes. You're training your brain to notice what matters. And remember, memory improves slowly. You may use these techniques today and still forget things tomorrow. That does not mean they failed. Your brain needs repeated practice. Think about learning a language. You do not become fluent after one conversation. Memory training works the same way. You become better through regular use. If you often forget English vocabulary, start with a very simple routine. Learn a small number of useful words. Understand each word. Create your own examples. Say the examples aloud. Test yourself later. Review after a few days. Use the words in real conversation. That is enough. You do not need 50 memory apps or complicated systems. A simple method that you actually follow is better than a perfect method that you never use. Also, stop judging yourself every time you forget something. Forgetting is part of learning. Sometimes forgetting is actually useful because when you struggle to remember something and finally retrieve it, that effort can strengthen your learning. So when you cannot remember immediately, do not look at the answer after 1 second. Give yourself time. Think. Search your memory. What did the words start with? Where did you see it? What example did you create? Can you remember the picture? Give your brain a chance to find the information. Then check the answer. This turns forgetting into practice. If you're learning through videos, do not watch everything passively. Pause sometimes. Ask yourself, what did the speaker just explain? Try to say it before continuing. At the end of the video, summarize the main ideas aloud. If the video teaches English phrases, choose 3 phrases and use them yourself. If you only watch one video after another, you may feel productive but remember very little. Learning requires participation. Reading works the same way. After a page or a short section, stop. Look away from the book. What was the main idea? Can you explain it? Can you give an example? What confused you? These questions turn reading into learning. When preparing for an exam, avoid spending all your time rereading. Use practice questions. Write answers from memory. Explain concepts aloud. Mix different topics. Return to older lessons. Identify what you cannot remember and spend more time there. Your weakest areas deserve more attention than the pages you already know well. For English speaking, practice retrieval in real time. Instead of always reading conversations, create situations. Imagine you are in a restaurant. What would you say? I'd like to order. Could I have? Can I get the bill, please? Now, imagine you're meeting someone for the first time. What would you say? Nice to meet you. Where are you from? What do you do? Practicing situations prepares your memory for real situations. When the moment arrives, the language feels familiar. This is one reason speaking practice is so important. Words become easier to remember when they become part of your behavior. The same is true for pronunciation. Do not only recognize a word when someone else says it. Say it yourself. Your mouth needs practice too. Read aloud. Repeat useful sentences. Record your voice. Listen again. Correct yourself. Then repeat. Using several senses can make learning more active. You see the sentence. You hear it. You say it. You write it. You imagine using it. You do not need to do this with every sentence. Use it for the information you really want to remember. You can also make learning emotional or funny. Suppose you're learning the word terrified. Do not create a boring sentence like, he was terrified. Imagine opening your bedroom door and seeing a giant tiger sitting on your bed. You scream, I'm terrified. You will probably remember that better. Emotion tells your mind that something is important. Humor works too. Strange examples can stay in memory because they're different from ordinary information. But keep your system simple. Memory techniques should help you learn, not become another difficult subject. If creating a complicated memory story takes 10 minutes for one word, it may not be practical. Choose the technique that fits the information. Sometimes one example is enough. Sometimes visualization helps. Sometimes repetition is necessary. Sometimes teaching works best. Sometimes you simply need more practice. The real secret is active learning. Pay attention, understand, connect, recall, review, use. If you regularly do these things, your ability to remember can improve significantly over time. And perhaps the most important part is consistency. Do not wait until you feel motivated. Motivation changes. Some days you will feel excited. Some days you will feel tired. Create a small routine that you can follow even on an ordinary day. Maybe your routine is only 30 minutes. For the first 5 minutes, remember yesterday's lesson. For the next 15 minutes, learn something new. For the next 5 minutes, explain it without notes. For the final 5 minutes, practice using it. That is already a powerful learning session. If you have more time, wonderful. If not, continue tomorrow. You do not need to become a completely different person overnight. Improve one habit. Maybe today you stop checking your phone while studying. Tomorrow you start testing yourself instead of rereading. Next week you begin reviewing older lessons. Little by little, your entire learning process changes. Many people say, I have a terrible memory. Be careful with that sentence. If you repeat it constantly, you may stop trying. Instead, say, I am learning how to remember better. That is more useful and more accurate. Memory is influenced by attention, understanding, practice, revision, rest, and many daily habits. You may be excellent at remembering faces, but bad at remembering names. You may remember stories, but forget numbers. You may remember something you practiced, but forget something you only read. This shows that memory is not one simple ability. Your learning method matters. So the next time you forget something, do not immediately become frustrated. Ask yourself a better question. Why did I forget this? Did I really pay attention? Did I understand it? Did I connect it to something? Did I test myself? Did I review it? Did I use it? Was I exhausted when I studied? Was I trying to learn too much? Your answer will often show you what to change. If you want a simple rule to remember everything we discussed, remember this. Do not try to force information into your brain. Give your brain reasons to keep it. Make the information clear. Make it meaningful. Connect it to something. Use it. Return to it. Try to recall it. Teach it. Practice it. And give yourself enough rest. For English learners, you can start today. Choose 5 useful words. Do not choose 50. Choose 5. Understand each one. Say each one aloud. Create one personal sentence for each word. Close your notebook and try to remember all 5. A few hours later, test yourself again. Tomorrow, review them before learning 5 new words. During the week, try to use them while speaking or writing. After 7 days, look back. You may be surprised by how much more you remember. Do the same thing with grammar. Do the same with speaking expressions. Do the same with lessons. Learning does not need to feel like fighting with your own brain. Once you understand how attention, meaning, recall, and repetition work together, studying can become much more organized. And remember, forgetting something does not mean that all your effort was wasted. Sometimes the information is still there, but difficult to retrieve. Sometimes you only need another review. Sometimes you need a stronger connection. Sometimes you need to use it in real life. Keep going. A strong memory is not created in one night. It develops through small choices repeated every day. Focus when you learn. Try to understand instead of only memorizing. Connect new knowledge to what you already know. Create pictures and examples. Teach ideas in your own words. Close your notes and test yourself. Review information over time. Use what you learn. Take care of your sleep. Reduce distractions. And most importantly, stay consistent. You do not have to remember everything perfectly. You only need to remember a little more today than you did yesterday. One new word, one useful sentence, one important idea, one small improvement. Those small improvements become strong learning habits. And strong learning habits can change the way you study, the way you speak English, and the way you learn almost anything. So the next time you sit down to study, do not simply ask, how long am I going to study? Ask, how actively am I going to learn? Do not count only the hours. Count the moments when you are truly focused. Count the ideas you could explain without looking. Count the words you actually used. Count the questions you answered from memory. Those are signs of real learning. Your brain is always learning what deserves attention. Show it what matters. Practice what matters. Return to what matters. Use what matters. And slowly, remembering will become easier. You may still forget sometimes. Everyone does. But instead of feeling helpless, you will know what to do. Focus again. Understand again. Recall again. Review again. Use it again. Keep learning, keep practicing, and give your memory time to grow.